Hello, everybody. I'm Roman Rodrigues, and this is physics. And the chapter that we're reading is on propagation and reflection of light. So today I'll just cover about reflection of light. Now, first we must understand the meaning of reflection. How and when does reflection take place? So whenever we look into a mirror or we we see a reflection, we see our own image, right? So in the same way, like when you're looking at the screen, you can see the light reflected from it. Uh, Even the large telescope use reflection to form an image of stars and other astronomical objects. You can see the picture over here. As you can see that the moonlight is spread out when it is reflected by the lake. And why is it so? Because the lake, as you can see, it is the surface is shiny and uneven. Uh, Now, there's a good figure over here about a lady standing in front of the mirror and the reflection that you can see. Now, there are many lines that are going across the arrowhead lines. They are right that is striking the mirror is the incident ray, and the one which is coming out, the arrowhead, which you see coming out, is the reflected ray. So, this there is a certain law that obeys the law of reflection. That is the incident ray, the reflected ray, and the normal. Now, what is the normal? Normal is actually the perpendicular distance from the mirror, uh, and the angle between the normal and the incident ray is called the angle of incidence, and the angle between the normal and the reflected ray is called the angle of reflection. So, the law of reflection basically obeys two laws: that the angle of incidence and the angle of reflection, they will always be equal, and the incident ray, the reflected ray, and the normal, they all point at the point of incidence. Okay, so with the help of reflection, the room looks even bigger, and you must have noticed that most of the shops which are small in size, they put these mirrors so that the reflection makes the room look bigger, right? So these mirror images make objects appear to be where they cannot be, like behind a solid wall. The images are not figments of our imaginations. Mirror images can be photographed and videotaped by instruments that look just as they do with our eyes, optical instruments themselves. So we'll be discussing now about the plane mirror, but in future lessons we'll be discussing even spherical mirrors as well. So that is concave and convex mirror. So now, so we already know that a ray of light approaches a smooth polished surface and the light ray bounces back. This is called reflection of light. And the incident ray which lands upon the surface is said to be reflected off the surface, and this ray which bounces back is called the reflected ray. And as I mentioned earlier, that the perpendicular drawn on the reflecting surface is called normal, and the angle of incidence is always equal to the angle of reflection, and the normal, the incident ray, and the reflected ray, they all lie on the point of incidence. Now here you can see by this diagram that this normal line is perpendicular to the mirror, and the incident ray and the reflected ray is shown over here, and the angle between the normal and the reflected, that is the reflection angle of reflection, and the angle between the normal and the incident is the angle of incidence. They are always equal, and all the three lines, the reflected ray, the incident ray, and the normal, they point at the point of incidence. Now it's mentioned over here as well in words that the law of reflection determines the reflection of incident light rays on reflecting surface like mirror, smooth metal. Now reflection takes place not on a smooth surface but also on an irregular surface. So we call that irregular reflection, and the one where light strikes a smooth polished surface is called regular reflection. So basically different types of reflection. Regular reflection, also known as specular reflection, then irregular reflection, known as diffuse reflection. The third type of reflection is multiple reflection. We will not be discussing multiple reflection over here in our lesson. We'll be more focused towards regular and irregular reflection. Now, there's a good figure over here about a lady standing in front of the mirror and the reflection that you can see. Now there are many lines that are going across the arrowhead lines. They are the right that is striking the mirror is the incident ray, and the one which is coming out the arrowhead. As you can see over here, the incident ray you can see, and the reflected ray which is bouncing back. Okay, all the incident ray is parallel to each other, and the reflected ray is also parallel. So if the reflected ray is not parallel, then we call that an irregular reflection. Now here you can see by this diagram that this normal line is perpendicular to the mirror, and the incident ray and the reflected ray is shown over here, and the angle between the normal and the reflected, that is the reflection angle of reflection, and the angle between the normal and the incident is the angle of incidence. They are always, as you can see over here, the incident ray is all uh, parallel, striking the surface, but the reflected ray is moving in different direction. But the law of reflection applies the same for both regular and irregular. Because if you consider each ray, and when we drop a normal basically is bisecting the incident ray and the reflected ray, and the angle between the angle of incidence, that is between the normal and the incident ray, and the angle of reflection, that is the angle between the reflected and the normal, will always be the same. So now what is the difference between regular and irregular reflection? Well, for regular reflection, it occurs when the reflected surface is smooth. When the reflected surface is smooth and they are parallel for parallel incident rays, when the lines of reflected lines are all parallel to the, and irregular surface, you know that when the surface is rough, it occurs from a given incident rays up. Incident ray may be parallel, but the reflected ray, they scatter in every direction. So basically the sunlight that reaches us is an example of an irregular reflection. Light scatters in every direction. And regular reflection occurs in smooth surface like a mirror, whereas irregular reflection occurs in rough surface like wood table. Regular reflection, you can see the image. Okay, you can see an image on the screen, that is on a shiny surface like the screen that we are here, or even on the mirror. But irregular reflection, um, there are no image formed, because when the light strikes the wooden surface, you are unable to see the image. Okay, you can see the object but not the image. So basically, we have covered. It was a brief introduction about reflection, what reflection is all about, and then we studied about the two laws of reflection, that the angle of incidence is equal to angle of reflection, and incident ray, reflected ray, and the normal, they all lie at the same point. And then we studied about different types of reflection, regular reflection and irregular reflection, and we also discussed the difference between regular and irregular reflection. So I hope the concept of reflection is clear to you all. Um, hope to see you in the next lesson. Till then, take care.